Safe spaces, trigger warnings, social justice and identity politics. Careful now, because there could be another millennial pet peeve coming your way. Courtesy of Officer Snowflake. That's right. The Home Office has been told in a police survey that rookie officers have been wrapped in cotton wool, are routinely shocked that police are expected to work nights and weekends, and do not like confrontation. OK, hold on. Let's cut Generation Broke some slack, shall we? Perhaps millennials are a bit emotionally volatile and narcissistic. But there was a generation that came before them, also obsessed by abstract idealism over practicalities. It's you, baby boomers, that gave birth to those dastardly millennials. Except before they grew up, you spent all their money, destroyed their planet, and made home-owning nigh on impossible for them. And now we, miserable Gen Xers, are stuck between two bickering hippie generations full of hot hair. So take responsibility for your own work, buccos. Pull yourselves up from your man buns and stop bullying your own children.
So is your central point here that people are going into the police force and they're ill-equipped for what is required of them? Or is it more around, actually, we've got what you would perceive, or some people perceive, a generation of snowflakes, and it is the parents' fault?
No, I actually don't think there is much of a difference between generations. I don't think there's any data to support that. Behavioural changes are more directly associated with a change in circumstances that we find ourselves in. So, for example, I'd whinge and moan if house prices went up the way they did and I was in my 20s right now, because that means I can never get on the housing ladder. So the whinging isn't innate to the generation, it's because the generation's opportunities have been cut back because of the behaviour of their parents' generations, and they're the ones complaining that these lot are whinging and moaning.
But for me, when I think about, and I do have younger brothers and a fair few young people that would fit into the category of what some people would describe as a snowflake. Yeah. And I sit there and I think one of the challenges is society and expectations and aspirations is changing extraordinarily. When I grew up, if I wanted anything, whether it was a pair of shoes or a bag or anything, I had to go and work. And I even had to pay board when I was a teenage girl to my parents to be at home. Yeah. When I think of, say, some of my nieces and nephews, etc., they are given a lot of stuff. I think that a lot of younger people have a sense of entitlement, but I don't think we're helping, because as a society, if I even think about universities, we're protecting people from speech that they may not like, opposing views. If I think of a playground at school, half the kids can't even go and play on a climbing frame in case they fall off because the parents are going to be running to go and sue health and safety. So I just think that we do need to step back a little bit and make sure that we're preparing young people for the world in which they're genuinely going to live.
I want to hear others, but I just want to say, in essence, what I'm saying is these are the same old debates being recycled from one generation about the younger generation. So whereas today, whatever, it's, you know, I used to run around until sunset without a mobile phone, and my mother never used to know where I was, and today they're always stuck to their phones. But in those days, my parents would say that to me about watching whatever on, you know, playing Street Fighter 2 on my Sega Mega Drive. So it's the same old debates we're rehashing. And actually, a lot of the snowflake behaviour, I mean, the hippie generation began all of that. They started it.
I have to say, Maajid, I'm almost speechless here. You didn't issue a trigger warning before you issued your vicious assault
on the baby boomer
generation, of which I am an example. Yes. Personally, I don't know if I can stay here on this programme with you because
I've offended you so much.
Because you've offended me so much.
Yeah, why don't you storm off, rip your microphone off and storm off?
Look, I mean, I think, you know, people can get a bit irritated about all of this. I think that there is probably something to be said about, if you're a young person, you want to make sure young people expect more of their employers than they used to, you know. I'm chairman of the company, where I'm probably twice the age of almost everybody else in the company, and their expectations about the way they should be treated are way, way higher than when I started.
But you expected more than your grandparents' generation.
Indeed. But, you know, I don't think... I mean, frankly, if people don't like the idea of being in the cops, then go and do something else. I mean, you know, I think this idea that a profession owes you, you know, your weekends and all the rest of it, is just wrong. There are some places where you can have that kind of life. Cops ain't in it.
I also, we're being a bit harsh on the millennials, though, aren't we? anyone born
I've got
post 1981?
I've given birth to 3 millennials.
Are you
so
baby boomer?
it's all my fault.
Yeah, definitely.
They are a bit... I mean, I don't want to talk personally, but I remember suggesting that my son should pay rent as he'd been living with us for a year. He was absolutely outraged. But I've made him.
Rachel, he'd say he'd already paid the price for many years living with you.
My mother made me pay board and bills as soon as I got a job, if I was under her roof. So I was brought up a bit like Michelle. But I think you're right, it's a generational thing. We all think that the generation below us is soft and we had it harder. Deloitte, though, has done a survey of millennials' attitudes to the workplace and some of their major gripes. Yeah. So what they say, that if I had a choice, 49% of millennials would quit their current job in the next 2 years.
That's because they're not happy, though.
Yeah, because they don't like the pay, most of them, lack of learning and development opportunities, about a third, and they don't feel appreciated.
Well, you know why they don't like the pay? Because baby boomers stole all their money. That's what's gone on.
That's another trigger warning.
Yes. I'm going to make an intervention as Generation X, wedged between the boomers and the millennials. And I remember being called, you know, the self-absorbed slacker generation as well. So you're right, Maajid, that every generation gets accused of all these things, and that's gone on for decades. I would suggest that the difference with millennials, though, is that they are the first generation for whom there isn't the expectation that they will be better off than the previous generation.
Of course, they complain more.
They are worse. They are worse off.
That's right.
You know, they have to deal with unaffordable housing, precarious employment. It's interesting, Rachel, that you mention the learning and development aspect. A third of them are interested in that, which suggests to me that if we're trying to look at making the most of millennials in the workforce, and they are the majority chunk of the workforce, and they will be more so going forward, then maybe that's the aspect to focus on, that if they're asking for professional development, maybe the employers should
if I were them, I'd be angry.
I think Rachel's point is profound, and it's a really important one. This is the first generation, actually probably in living memory, where the children are going to have a lower standard of living than their parents. However, I think what we should also say, when it comes back to the cops, because that's what this was about, let's just remember that policing now is not what it used to be. I mean, being a copper used to be walking around with big boots and then you nab somebody by the collar. Actually, today's police officers are just as likely to be sitting behind a computer screen going through reams and reams of data. So actually, the millennials who are playing games and all the rest of it in their basements, frankly, cops could be the right place for them.
Well, also, think about the way policing has changed in the sense that if you've got rising crime and stabbings and what have you, more police are now being attacked by suspects than ever before as well, and they're not getting the mental health support that they actually need. So you've got this generation that can't afford to get on the housing ladder, whose wages are basically stagnated, who are observing inequality rise, who are watching the fact that they are not going to be wealthier than their parents' generation, and on top of that, crime's going up. You know, you don't feel safe. I'd be complaining if I was them. I'd be upset and insecure about the world. I mean, it doesn't make what they do correct. I mean, I don't accept this notion of, you know, if I don't like what you say, shut you down. But there is, I think, there are some psychological factors at play. Unhappy with their jobs. They want to leave after 2 years.
Yeah, but they're the generation who've got to fix this now. Because, you know, the baby boomers were all retiring.
Yeah. Well, you've spent all their money.
No, it's our money. It's still our money.
Setting up generational conflict.
Right.